I can do whatever, but
We can just hop right into it.
yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Lower Paxton Township Board of Supervisors to order. I'd like to ask everyone to please stand, and Mr. Chrisman will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Before we proceed, we are going to have a ceremony this evening, and it's been a difficult few months around here. We're pleased to welcome Mrs. Billy Hawk with us this evening. And as you may know, last week the board took action to appoint Mr. Norm Zumas to the Board of Supervisors. We actually did swear him in the next day in a private ceremony, but we wanted to do it publicly so that his friends and family and the whole community could be here. So with that, we have Magisterial District Judge Joseph Lindsay here. If Mr. Lindsay would come to the podium. Mr. Zumas, if you and your wife would go to the podium, and Judge Lindsay will administer the oath of office to Norman Zumas.
Are you ready to take your oath of office, sir? Please raise your right hand. Say aye and repeat your name. I solemnly swear. I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. The Constitution of this Commonwealth. Discharge the duties of my office. Supervisor of Lower Paxton Township. Fidelity. Be God. Congratulations. Thank you.
Well, congratulations, Mr. Zumas, and we're going to put you to work right away. We have a very full agenda this evening. Before we go to public comment, I would like to announce that prior to this meeting, the Board of Supervisors met in executive session, and we received information from the Township Manager. We discussed a number of personnel issues, and we did some scheduling for upcoming meetings and events, one of which will be next Tuesday when the board will meet in workshop to begin the budgeting process. And that meeting will begin at 5 o'clock next Tuesday in the meeting room next door. So with that, would anybody from the public like to address the board on a matter not on the agenda tonight? Would anybody like to address the board on a matter not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will then move to item 5 on the agenda. And Mike Bova and Mr. Wenger, and I see Tom is here, and we are going to have a discussion regarding potential debt issuance and refunding of existing bonds. We're getting to the exciting stuff right away. So, good evening. Yeah.
Jay, can you turn that on? The bottom?
Green light?
Got it.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah,
There we go.
thank you.
So we were here a few weeks ago, maybe a couple months at this point, just to provide a debt overview, and we had mentioned the 2009 C bonds, which we call Build America bonds, that can be refunded at the call date next year. And since then, there's been some clarification from the IRS on what we actually can and cannot do in the tax-exempt world. And so I invited Mr. Smythe because he is your bond counsel, but based on the IRS pronouncement, we are permitted to refinance Build America bonds with tax-exempt bonds prior to the call date. So that raises the opportunity at a minimum to evaluate that refunding, and this is a very interest rate sensitive transaction. So when we started this conversation a few weeks ago, the savings were higher than they are today, but still worthy of a conversation. And so in the presentation, as background, again, I think we had shown you this chart the last time, or a graph. The blue line is the 10-year Treasury, which is the most recognizable interest rate benchmark to follow on a day-to-day basis. And you can see, again, going back to Brexit, the very low was about 1.4%. We're now just under 3%. It was about 2.9% late this afternoon. So still very attractive borrowing rates, but up from the all-time low. The red line is 1-month LIBOR. Again, just measure short-term rates. The significance of that red line really is the Fed's effort to try to increase short-term rates in an effort to get longer-term rates higher. You can see there's been a significant increase from 0 now to just over 2% for short-term rates, and yet 10-year Treasury has moved less than 1.5%. So longer-term rates are lagging behind the short-term rate move. The Fed is working assiduously to try to get longer-term rates higher as well. If I knew the answer, this would be an easy conversation. Again, interest rate outlook, the Federal Open Market Committee has said they'll probably raise rates 1, maybe 2 times the balance of 2018, so we are expecting 1 more in September, perhaps 1 in December based on the economic data that has been coming out. They've also indicated that their expectation is probably 3 more rate hikes in 2019, all of which are anticipated to be 0.25% in each step. So if you take 1 or 2 more and then 3 next year, that's somewhere between 1 and 1.25% over the next, call it, 16 months. Again, the economic data is very low, unemployment, and also starting to see some signs of inflation, although it depends where you look, you find it or you don't find it, but the Fed is convinced it's coming. What am I not? There we go. Again, the recap of the township's debt, and the series that we're discussing is the top line, the 2009. They are taxable bonds, they're Build America bonds. You can see the coupon ranges from 6.245 to 6.345, but you do receive a subsidy so the net rate is a bit lower than that. The principal amount outstanding right now is just over $42 million, and that money was used to finance authority projects, not general fund projects of the township. Here's the allocation, and you can see, did I miss a page? I guess that's right. You can see the allocation by series, debt service running out on the 2016 bonds to 2037. And I did miss a page. Let's go back.
Next page.
Next
I'll get it
page.
for you. There you go.
There we go. I think I went backwards. That's the Friendship Center debt. So relatively short. We're getting to the end of the Friendship Center debt. You can see the peak is in 2021 at just under $400,000, and then it drops down to about $250,000 from 2022 to 2025. And here is the authority debt. Again, the second column of debt service numbers is the subsidy you receive for the interest rate, so that you get a net rate that offsets the gross debt. So your effective rate is more in the 4s, not 6%. And again, the outstanding principal is $42,465,000. The call date is October 1 of 2019. So, if we were doing this in a classroom, we would say, let's wait till the call date if we knew where interest rates were going to be. And you'll see the effect of that in a moment. We can refund those in advance of that call date, but the money gets set aside in an escrow account. So that escrow account is invested at current Treasury market rates, which are less than the existing rate on that debt. So there's a negative carry in that escrow account, which offsets the pure interest rate savings between now and the call date. The subsidy is about 35%, and so you'll see, should be on the next slide. There you go. The effective rate is ranges from just under 4.2 to 4.26. The subsidy, while it was supposed to have been fixed at the time Build America bonds were introduced, has been slightly decreased as a result of federal budget changes, but it's been a modest change from 35% down to 32.8%, and currently there's not any talk of reducing that further. Again, if we were to refund those bonds today using current interest rates, setting the money aside in an escrow account, waiting until the call date of next year to actually pay the investors off in full, the net present value savings are just under $940,000. That is the equivalent of 2.21% of the bonds being refunded. So there are a couple benchmarks in the industry. I'd say the most commonly used is 3% savings. We've seen issuers do it as low as 2%. Below 2%, we would strongly encourage you to wait for a better market opportunity and prefer to see 3% savings because you get one advance refunding, so we want to make it as efficient as we can. If we wait till the call date in October of 2019 and interest rates are exactly the same as they are today, the net present value savings increased to $2,682,682,000. So you can see a very significant increase from an advance refunding today to a current refunding a year out, assuming interest rates don't change. Now, as much as that dollar amount changes in savings, in interest rates, it's only a 35 basis point change that would bring us right back to that $939,000 of savings. So in other words, if we wait and interest rates go up by 35 basis points at this time next year, the savings would be the same as they are today. So it's a very interest rate sensitive transaction. And so, a couple weeks ago when we thought rates were about 20 basis points lower, that $940,000 was about $1.6 million or $1.7 million. So it doesn't take much movement in rates to significantly affect the refunding outcome. So there's an option. There really are a couple considerations. One is, at what savings level would you consider this refinancing productive and worth undertaking? And the second is, where do we think interest rates are going and how much interest rate risk do we want to assume between now and the call date? Now, from your perspective, however, the call date doesn't mean you have to refinance those bonds. So you can always wait. There will probably be an opportunity at some point at or after the call date to refinance those bonds. But again, once you get to the call date, every day after that is, if you will, an opportunity cost of having not been able to refinance that debt. So we can enter into what they call a cash settle hedge, which is effectively buying an interest rate as a hedge. And so, just make the math easy. Let's say your debt has an average life of 10 years. The hedge would be effectively a 10-year interest rate. It doesn't obligate you to enter into any interest rate swap contracts at the call date. It's merely a hedge against interest rates going higher. So the expectation is, at the call date, at the time you would issue refunding bonds, you would settle up on that transaction and just issue traditional fixed rate bonds. And so you can see here then, and just very simply, as interest rates go up, the value of that swap transaction is positive to the township. If interest rates go lower than the rate at the time you enter into that transaction, it's a cost to the township. So the concept here is, if interest rates rise, and again, 35 basis points is kind of our sensitivity, if interest rates increase, your refunding savings are going to decrease because you're in a higher interest rate environment at the time you issue the bonds, but the interest rate swap has value, so they offset one another. Conversely, if interest rates were to decrease, the savings on the refunding would be higher, but the cost of terminating the swap would be a negative, so it's an offset. It's not pure dollar for dollar, but it's an effective hedge. And so you can see on the top line in the current, again, those are the present value savings if rates don't change. And you can see it's almost $2.7 million. As I mentioned earlier, we look for a minimum of 3% savings. Those savings are slightly over 6% of the bonds to be refunded. If interest rates were to decline by 50 basis points, so in other words, we would go back to almost the all-time low of rates, the present value savings in the refunding would be almost $5.4 million. And then you can see as interest rates increase, just by 50 basis points from current savings, you would not do the refunding. The savings drop to about $188,000, less than 0.5% of the bonds you're refunding. And again, our target would be 3%. So the value of the cash settle swap is, you can see in the bottom part of the page, the same savings translate to the bottom part of the page based on interest rate environments. But then you have a swap payment, which if rates go lower is a negative. So if rates went down by 0.5%, you would have almost $5.4 million of refunding savings, but a termination payment of $2.6 million, a net of 2.7. So that's significant because while we don't expect rates to decline, certainly it's possible that they would, and 50 basis points would bring you right back to where if you did nothing and rates stayed the same, it's almost the same outcome. So the real risk is that rates go higher and the refunding opportunity would disappear. And again, you can see as interest rates go up by 50 basis points, we would not recommend you do the refunding. You could simply terminate the swap and you would effectively get a payment and still retain the refunding option. And so you can see then in the shaded yellow line, net savings, even at 50 basis points higher, you would be saving almost $1.5 million net of transaction costs. The savings are almost 3.5%. The higher interest rates go, the more value the swap has, the less value the refunding has. So frankly, if, in a perfect world, rates would go up by 100 basis points in the next 6 months, you would terminate the swap, they would come back down, and you could issue refunding bonds. That would be the perfect kind of textbook outcome, but we certainly aren't here to tell you that's what's going to happen. So let me just stop there because I think there are a couple questions that are probably on your minds right now. Mr. Chrisman.
You anticipate I'll have some questions. One,
It's level debt.
yeah, and I don't expect you to go back because I have a series of questions and I don't care how you respond to them. One, everything that you were dealing with was principal only, correct? Because we're paying principal plus we're paying interest, but the dollars you're using are principal dollars only. At least that's what I was reading in screen one.
We refund just principal, that's correct.
Right, okay. So the other
Let me correct. So if you did advance refunding bonds, though, it would escrow the interest payments between now and the call date. So there would be a modest interest component in there that would be converted to principal on the refunding issue.
Right. I just wanted to clarify in my own mind as I was working through your sheets, I was still processing.
Yes.
Okay. And then dealing with our call date, and that percentage obviously is going to fall whenever we have the call date, which says, leading me to the last screen, which is the last question I'm going to ask you. Since you do this every day, what's the rate assumption going to be?
Well,
I mean, what does your gut tell you with regard to? And again, you're sitting at your desk, you're analyzing this every day. Obviously, for me, you're the person who has the most knowledge. What do you see, and where do you see the market going? Where do you see the assumption rates going?
Yeah. So it's a
Which
great
obviously
question.
will be for me the most important thing in making a decision.
Yeah. So I'll start with, if you put 10 economists in a room.
And throw in one more, the 2.2%, and I know we're getting right to that point. Are we close enough yet? And if so, you can roll that all into one response, I'm sure.
Yeah. So
because they're all tied together.
I'll start with, if you put 10 economists in a room, you get 15 opinions on where interest rates are going. Okay, so nobody knows. As recently as late last week, Jamie Dimon, who's a highly regarded large bank CEO, said 10-year rates should be at 5%, and you should expect that. I don't think they go to 5%, but that's certainly somebody's opinion, and I'll give him a lot of credit. He probably is a lot smarter than I am.
Okay.
The reality of what happens when the Fed tries to increase rates in today's marketplace is they're fighting a lot of international events and forces. So, 20 years ago, if the Fed had said we're raising short-term rates, it would have been much more logical for long-term rates to follow almost step by step with those short-term rate increases, and you would maintain the same steepness in the yield curve from 30 days to 10 years to 30 years. Because we're now dealing in an international market, and if you look around the globe, there are a lot of countries and continents, for that matter, who are struggling economically. South America is not doing very well. Europe, with the exception of Germany, is still struggling mightily to come out of the 2009-2010 recession. So those factors tend to be a limiting force or a contra-force on long-term U.S. interest rates, because the U.S. government is still considered the most stable sovereign debt you can buy, and it's still highly sought out by the largest buyer, which is still the Chinese. So while short-term rates have been going up and they have some effect on economic activity, the real effect on economic activity is longer-term rates, and as long as there are investors willing to pay for safety, the ability for the Federal Open Market Committee to strongly influence longer-term rates is much less than their ability to influence short-term rates, because they set the short-term rate, the market sets the long-term rate. Mm-hmm. So there are some at the other end of that spectrum of the 10-year is going to go to 5%. There are some at the other end suggesting that, well, you can raise short one, we're just going to have a flat yield curve. So short-term rates might go to 3, the 10-year is going to stay at 3. There have been a couple of factors in addition to what the Fed's doing that play into this. One is with the recent changes of the tax code, which included a reduction on refunding opportunities in the tax-exempt market, that has greatly reduced the volume of tax-exempt bonds. So tax-exempt bonds haven't moved as much as we would have expected them to move in a different business environment, but the same interest rate environment, because there are fewer bonds in the marketplace. And tax-exempt bonds, particularly in Pennsylvania, are acutely sensitive to supply and demand factors. So that has also held tax-exempt rates down lower than they otherwise probably would be today. As to where they're going to be a year from now, I don't know that answer. And again, 3 or 4 weeks ago, when this idea was brought to us, the refunding savings were higher by 600,000 or 700,000, and I thought it would be a good refunding opportunity, not a time to enter into a hedge. It's only taken a 20 basis point move for that refunding, in my opinion, to not be a transaction we would recommend today. But I view the hedge at a 35 basis point, what I'll call band. That's a pretty tight movement in interest rates. Yeah. So we don't have to be necessarily right or wrong as to where interest rates are going to have a move 35 basis points. Jamie Dimon could be dead wrong. The guys who say the yield curve's going flat could be dead wrong. 35 basis points can happen in days or weeks.
Okay. Jay, 2 more, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
On, if you mentioned it in your discussion and I didn't mentally follow through, but if we exercise the call date, then we have what I'm going to call a void period of time before that gets reinvested. And where are we with that, and what's the time frame for that issue?
The call date is October 1 of 2019. So,
okay.
Let's just map this out. Let's say you come back after Labor Day and you decide you want to proceed with the refunding. It would be probably November 1st before we actually got to a settlement date. So okay. That window from when you would issue refunding bonds to the call date is probably 10 to 12 months.
Okay, so that's what I was looking for, that window. Okay.
So it's not an overly expensive proposition, but it does, again, because of the interest rate sensitivity, it does significantly affect the savings to a level where doing it today, in our opinion, is not would not be our recommendation.
Okay, and then the final question is, based on your assessment of the portfolio and what you're looking at right now, what is your recommendation? Or do you want to hold and wait for 2 or 3 months and come back again?
Well, so again, if I knew that answer, this would be really easy.
Well, isn't that what we have you for?
It sounds like this has changed considerably from the point a couple of weeks ago, whenever you contacted us and wanted to
Well, when we,
Re- you know,
3 weeks
restart the
ago, I would have
conversation.
said, let's do the refunding today. I thought it was, the savings were high enough, and, you know, we don't need to hedge, let's take what we can get and move on. I do think the cash settle swap hedge has value in today's marketplace, because we're only talking 35 basis points.
Right.
And you can see at a 50 basis point move, we wouldn't refund the bonds, but you would still receive a check.
Exactly.
So I view that as a good risk management tool. And I like the risk reward part of it, because the hedge, now you give up a little bit. If rates don't change at all, it does cost you a little bit to get out of that trade. So it's not a free transaction, but I like the risk reward part of it.
Good.
So what
Thank
is the recommendation?
Our recommendation would be to proceed with the cash settle swap, assuming rates don't go against us more between the day from today and when we would actually execute, but at least work toward that outcome. And then we have the hedge in place, and then we look for the right market opportunity to either issue the bonds and/or terminate the swap.
So that basically gives us more flexibility.
Gives you more flexibility, yes.
Absolutely.
Yep. And hedges are upside that Jamie Dimon's right, and the guys who say rates aren't going up are wrong.
Good. Thank you, Jay.
If you said, you know, let's wager $5 over which way rates are going, I would want to take the side of interest rates are going higher, not lower. So
Yeah.
that's
Sure.
why I view the hedge as having value.
I would agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we hit the pause button for just a minute? Because I skipped over something, and I think Representative Marsico needs to leave shortly, but Supervisor Zumas would like to recognize a few folks who are in the audience, and we want to do that so the representative can get on the way. Or would you like to make a comment? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was looked out into the audience, and there were co-workers from previous employments, co-workers from current employments, members from the Heroes Grove Committee. Vinny's here, president of the Heroes Grove Committee. I want to make mention of the fact that Major General Walt Podlowski's here. I had the distinct pleasure of working on his staff when he was at the 28th Infantry Division and commanded it. And I think one of the assignments was the Battle Command Training Program Coordinator, which was a real learning experience. And as the chairman said, I know Ron was just down at the airport, had some business to conduct down at the Harrisburg International. And I know he and his lovely wife Elaine are getting ready to go to a dinner. And I know Ron's a busy man. I appreciate you coming by. Thank you so much. I know that the demands on his time is just unbelievable. I mean, until I got involved in the process, I knew he was busy, but I never realized just how much. So thank you for being here. So for everyone, and last but not least, I want to thank my wife, Betsy. Betsy's been by my side for almost 53 years, and we've been married going on 49. And she's been there through all my decisions and my ventures, you might say, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. And that's all I had to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry I delayed that. Ron, did you want to say something, or? Could you come up to the podium so the folks at home, and my apologies for interrupting the presentation, but it's taking a little longer than I thought it might, so.
Interest rates might go up as we're talking.
Well, that the way the markets have been, don't they like close at 5 o'clock or something, Tom? Yeah. So we're safe for the evening. Yeah.
Just got to say, Norman Zumas comes to you, Lower Passion supervisors and the constituents, as well prepared. Prepared in his background as a military officer, worked multiple years for a local business, Hoffman Ford, and also with me for I don't know how many years now, as a
Almost
legislative
5.
assistant, 5 years, as a legislative assistant. And I think I know he's prepared to meet the challenges that are going to face him as a supervisor of Lower Paxton Township. So on behalf of myself and staff and family, congratulations to Norm
Thank you, Ron.
and to his wife, family. Thank you.
Thank you.
Interest rates?
Thank you, Representative. Anything, would you like to say anything more, Norm, before we?
That ought to do it. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, we appreciate everybody who is here to witness your swearing in as supervisor. I thought when I saw the Heroes Grove folks here that they were all here because I think we're going to take action on recommendations for a grant, which I think Vince might want us to look favorably upon. You want us to look favorably upon the grant recommendation for the next phase of Heroes Grove? Phase 3, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, so that's also on the agenda this evening. And with that, hopefully interest rates have remained steady, so if you would like to continue.
Yes. So again, our position is that for a rate sensitivity of 35 basis points, hedging interest rate risk we think makes sense. The only downside to the transaction is, so you enter into the transaction, it's not tied to any third party or third party credits, and you're not obligated to issue any bonds. So there are no market conditions that force you to do something with that transaction that you don't want to do. The downside is that interest rates wouldn't move at all, or rates go lower, and we should not have not entered into the hedge. So if you're of the mindset that rates aren't going anywhere, or not by more than 0.25%, then you don't want to do this. For a modest cost of protecting interest rate risk, I think it makes sense. There are some out-of-pocket expenses to enter into the transaction, so there is a cost to the transaction. It's not free.
Do you know, Jay, approximately what that is?
I would say 40 to 50,000 just as a ballpark number.
Any additional questions?
No, Jay, nothing changed while you were in hiatus between your first part of the presentation and your second part?
Not that I'm aware.
Thought maybe the climate would become
Probably
more favorable. Tom, did you wish to add anything to the discussion?
Well, if you decide, and I think what we're asking for you this evening to do is to make it, give us direction as to which way you want to proceed. If you do authorize us to go forward with this, we'll enter into discussions with the RBC Bank has approached the township and Jay to structure this transaction. For state law purposes, it is similar to issuing debt. There is a local government unit debt procedure that would have to be respected, and we'll have to have a public meeting, at which point in time an interest rate management plan would have to be approved. We'll be working, assuming you give us direction, we'll be working on that preparation. And there is a submission to the Department of Community and Economic Development that has to be filed, similar to a debt proceeding. There is not a 20-day waiting period in this case because it's not debt. We would also have to negotiate and consider the impact on the subsidy agreement with the authority. So those are the steps logistically and legally.
I do have a question that will complicate this maybe. Should the township desire to add new money to this borrowing, how would it affect the process?
Well, at this time, we're not talking about a new
Issuing debt,
borrowing.
right.
This is a separate contract. The 2009 BABs will serve as the notional amount to which this interest rate would be, interest rate management agreement would relate to. Were you to, if you want new money, that would be separate and apart. That would be a new issue. From a tax perspective, that has no impact on entering into this contract.
But you do raise an interesting point, George, in that if you're contemplating new money, it's helpful for us to understand your time frame for that, because we would like to link them together in 2019 if we can. If you need this money immediately,
Yeah.
that's a different conversation.
No, it would be a 2019
Yeah,
issue.
and I think we probably can find an opportunity to put it into a single financing, but it doesn't change the hedge opportunity.
Okay.
This is not debt. This is a separate contract.
Yeah, just a
It's
contract
It's just that
related
it
to the debt.
relates to the debt.
It's a restructuring, correct?
No, in this case, what you're entering into is purely a hedge against interest rates.
Well, let me ask you this, and I think I know the answer, but I sort of want to hear it. A number of years ago, I recall various school districts, I think one in Chester County, if I'm
Well,
not mistaken.
There's
Bethleham's the poster
Northampton,
North-
Pittsburgh, there were any number.
Is it the word
State
swap
College.
that's?
The word swap sets
Right.
off alarm bells in my head. For,
It's probably different.
Is that wrong?
And it should.
No, it should.
should?
So
And it
Okay.
should.
You've hit on the right button.
The
So
local school district did okay with it.
they did, yes. And so there are, you know,
Are you familiar with that local school district? Okay.
And Jay would be familiar with that also.
Yes, Jay Wood.
there are a lot of success stories. The poster child for complete failure was Bethlehem School District, and without getting too deep into the weeds, they entered into about 12 different interest rate swap transactions and essentially stacked them like boxes, one on top of another, relating to one another, and almost all of them related to third-party credit. So when the financial markets started to unravel in October of 2008, most of their third-party credit was with foreign institutions. And the foreign institutions, as soon as the U.S. financial market started to crack, said, we're out of here. We don't want to talk to anybody. We're done. We're not renewing credit. Their credit facilities were up for renewal. And so instead of trying to go find credit at whatever price to preserve their swap portfolio, they just decided to unravel everything. So again, in Monday morning quarterbacking, looking back, they picked probably, I don't think you could pick a worse day to do what they did, but they made a decision based on, in part emotion, in part on what they thought the right future of the district was, but they are the poster child for what goes wrong. In this case, it's one transaction that's a hedge against higher rates. So our risk is that interest rates go lower. We're not tied to any third party telling us what we have to do or what we need from them in order for this transaction to work. If it were tied to a third party, I would be far less inclined to enter into something where we don't have an absolute guarantee from them.
So basically, the only way that we don't do well is if interest rates go into a steep decline.
If interest rates stay the same, there is some cost, but you still have an effective refunding. If interest rates drop by more than 25 basis points, we're going to look back and say we shouldn't have done that.
And Jay will make certain that happens.
I wish I had that kind of
They
power.
do drop by 20.
And we don't need an answer tonight. I think Tom had indicated he'd give us some sense of direction. If you prefer to sleep on this and come back at another meeting, we are certainly happy to do that as well.
Would it be the desire of the board that we sort of take this under consideration and digest all of this until next week?
I would like to, but I also want to know what's our time frame in terms of making our decision for commitment so that we can expedite in a timely fashion that's going to be to our advantage. And I'm going to yield to both of you if you need to have discussion, or do one of you know?
As Tom mentioned, it requires a resolution at an advertised public meeting. So there's some timing here, but unlike a bond issue where we have to go through a rating process, which takes 3 or 4 weeks, and then we have to issue bonds, and then we need DCD.
We're not subject to any of that.
We're not
Okay,
subject
okay,
to that.
that helps also in the process.
Much more streamlined process. We could effectively, if you said come back next week and you made a decision, we could, in a matter of probably no more than 7 to 10 days, be effectively done.
Okay.
And we also have, if we get to the day where we want to execute and the market's gone against us, you're not obligated to execute.
Very good.
And there's no money out of pocket to you unless you execute.
So we could put this on the agenda for next week, and then if we decide not to, we simply don't approve it.
We just withdraw it from the agenda?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Why don't we do that?
Yeah, I think that would be to our best advantage.
Your risk is purely interest rates, and that's
Exactly.
what this is. It's a you're betting the rates are going to go up.
Jay, have you ever done this for the township before, or is this a
Not for
first?
Lower
this
Paxton,
township?
no.
Okay.
No.
So
And
this is a first?
Yeah,
Yes.
so we've, as Chris had mentioned, when I was on the board with Chris at Central Dauphin, we had done several, and, not to boast, but I think we pocketed $6 or $7 million round trip. So what I tell clients is there is a right time and a right place for almost everything that's in the marketplace. There are clearly wrong times and wrong decisions for almost everything in the marketplace. So in our mind, it's assessing risk and reward and managing the risk and trying to make good decisions.
Not having done this before, what made you decide to bring this to the board to do this?
Well, it actually came to us by way of RBC Capital Markets. They looked at it and said, we think this is a better option. And again, 3 weeks ago, I didn't agree with them,
Right.
but the market has changed. And so based on interest rates today and the opportunity cost, I actually like the proposition.
Any additional questions from the board?
No, thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the public? Okay, we will place it on the agenda for next week and spend the week digesting all this information. Thank you both
Great,
very much.
thank you.
Mr.
Appreciate it.
Chairman, just a comment. Just a comment to say it's nice having the hometown boys protecting our own municipality.
Yeah, you can't get much more hometown. So, okay, now we're going to have continued discussion regarding development of the storm water fee. Ms. Urban, the podium is yours. And I'm sure Mr. Judd will want to enter into this as well. Maybe.
So before I get started, I did want to mention, in case you guys didn't see the township news from July, Lower Paxton was actually featured in this publication for our communications efforts, more recently in the last 6 months being on Facebook and sharing our events and the way we do things. So I thought that was really exciting. So if you haven't read it, it's a good read.
I've got to start reading that.
As far as the stormwater fee, this was included in the board packet that was on the website, as well as your board packet. It references a meeting that took place with Raftellus. There were 2 Raftellus staff members present, Supervisor Chris Judd, Randy Allen, the township's engineering field technician, township manager George Wolf, and myself. And this meeting was hosted in effort to set up a timeline, what the process would be for the stormwater fee. And if you read through these notes, it could seem kind of overwhelming. But basically, the gist of what Raftellus is trying to do is put together a plan for devising a base rate for our stormwater fee. They are currently working on that. The next step is to meet again with that small group and say, here's the base rate. Here are various options that you can add to that base rate. Supervisors, what do you think? So that's where we're at right now. They're putting those numbers together. In the meantime, while that's happening, the township is putting together a list of large groups. So for example, malls, churches, big land property owners. We have that list together. We're putting parcel numbers to that list, and those groups will be met with on a different timeline. They will be met with first, and we'll explain how this rate base works, what the process is. Then after that, there will be public meetings for the general population. So number 1, that list is what's being worked on. Number 2 is the process of notifying residents that don't get a sewer bill. So people that have on-lot sewage system septic tanks, they will get a separate letter from us with that same sewer insert that went out to the rest of the population. So that will go out in the next few weeks, so they too are aware that this is not just people that have sewer bills. This is everybody in the township will have this fee. So as I mentioned, the next step. So Raftellus will put these numbers together. We'll have a quick conference call next week, make sure that we're all on the same page as far as the staff and what's going on with that presentation. And then it's a matter of setting up a time with you guys to sit down and for them to publicly present those numbers and their ideas in terms of what best package would be for Lower Paxton. So there is no set date as of right now for public meetings. They will be later September, October timeframe, according to the timeline we have with Raftellus.
Good.
So the group, the individual stakeholder group meetings will occur first.
They will occur first, yes.
Then we will have, how many public meetings and opportunities for public input will there be?
As of right now, 2 is what Raftellus has agreed to. We can certainly request more, but that's, obviously they're coming from out of town. So just making sure we can get it on their schedule is the only
And
conflict.
those don't include these kinds of board meetings.
Correct.
Those are in addition to just regular public board meetings, Board of Supervisor meetings.
So the public meetings will be just to talk about this issue. They're not official board meetings, but they're informational
As
meetings.
far as in our contract with Raftellus, which is the consultant we hired to do this, yes, 2 will be dedicated to the general public.
And Leanne, how are we going to get them out to them? Because a lot of our older population doesn't have website, they're not on Facebook. How are they going to know when those meetings are going to be scheduled?
At this point, I believe it's going to have to be a paper letter that we send
okay.
out. So that is going to be a small cost to the township to actually
Okay.
put that out there. But I think that's the best way at this point to ensure that everybody, including our septic system residents,
Okay.
get that information.
So if I understood it right, the 2,500 that have the septic, they have not received
Correct.
the insert that was in the sewer bill. Okay. And that, you said that'll be going out in a couple of weeks to them?
Yes.
Okay.
Before any of this takes place, I'm hoping within the next week. We had an issue with that list. It needed to be updated, so we're just waiting on that.
Okay, thank you.
Leanne, I missed part of that dialogue at that end of the table, because of my hearing. But when she was asking about senior citizens, I assume somewhere down the road that we may even be going to places like the Friendship Center, where there is a center for seniors, just an FYI, and again, for a learning experience. Is that going to also be in the planning as well?
In terms of a separate meeting for them, or you just mean relaying the information that there will be a meeting?
I think it's more at that point, at least I'm assuming, I don't know all of the details of the planning, but it may be more informational at that point in time. And then coupled with that, I'm hoping that we also would provide informational maybe to some of our service organizations, Lions, Kiwanis, Rotary, and then some of those, because again, those are people who do talk and work in our community every single day. And, the tentacles then go out also. It's just another way I think of, if you will, and I hate to use the term, but marketing that which is required.
I think in reference to that, it would be great if we had, even if it's Mr. Judd, who's been at these individual meetings, if he went on behalf of the township, rather than bringing Raf Tellis up here every time, but we could have supervisors.
Oh, absolutely.
Feels comfortable. I could go, whoever you'd like to attend, but I think that would be a great opportunity. That's a great idea.
And I think it's also better when we talk to our community. I think it has more credibility when we who live here, work here, play here, and will be paying the tax, as opposed to the consultant
Absolutely.
who's the outsider. It just has, I think it has more validity when I sit down and talk one-on-one with another resident.
Right. And
So, thank you.
And the consultant will be there mainly for, they can offer information. They're the ones that are doing the calculations, but they're not the ones making the decisions. So their role will be there for that. And we talked about stakeholders, and we had it up there. It's on the agenda, the public agenda. So we're talking as far as outside of the general public. There's schools, hotels, hospitals, the malls, plazas, businesses, storage facilities, office parks, apartment complexes, developers, churches, golf courses, the larger gas stations, Sheetz, and other large tracts of land. So we're trying to not just take a too general, throw the general net out there. We're trying to break it down to manageable bits so that everybody understands and everyone gets a hearing. And there are things that this board has to give the consultants direction on, correct? And I want to make sure we understand the timing on that. We ultimately have to decide if the residential, the single-family residential tiers, if it's just going to be one residential, one fee for all residential, or do we want to separate them by lot sizes, large residential properties versus smaller properties, like the Judd property, and also credit programs. Do you get certain credits? Best management practices. Do we want to offer credits for people who do that? And there's upsides and downsides to each. There's a cost for the more fees you have, the more administrative calculations you need to make, the more complicated the fee structure gets. If you set up a credit program, if you collect water over here, or if you do mitigation over here, the more complicated it gets, the more costly the administrative end of it becomes. And so that's something that our consultants will ultimately need direction from the board and the public as far as how do we want to go forward, because then they have to calculate, okay, well, if this is what the cost is, you've got administrative cost, then you need to, the fee has to be this high. So it's going to affect the overall numbers. So, and they threw out, in our last meeting, they threw out the estimation that if we begin to tier the residential tiers, setting up different fees, the additional clerical cost for billing and services could be $80,000 a year. If we do a credit program, depending on the complexity of the program, it could be $100,000 $100,000. So these are just numbers that we have to consider and decisions that the board's going to have to make to give our consultants direction going forward so that when they crunch the numbers, they know what they're crunching. And as we said at the previous meeting, the anticipation, I think I speak for the board, is that, I mean, we're already entering the fall. This is not going to be taking effect in January. This is not going to, we're not going to move forward till we're ready to move forward.
Question, Mr. Judd, in terms of these decisions that we have to make relative to whether we have a tiered structure, if we allow credits, will the timing of that decision come after the stakeholder and public meeting so the board has an opportunity to have that input before the decision is made?
I don't think there's time for that. And you can see, we kind of laid it out.
It would be good to know it would be good to have community input before we make a decision as to what the structure is going to be. That's,
Board members, the next step would be for you to see what the base rate would be and what variations of that rate would be based upon best management practices and/or variations based upon lot size for residential structures. Raftellus is preparing that information now and is going to present that to you at your next meeting. Once you see that, you'll be able to have an idea of how you want to proceed. Obviously, you won't make a final decision on proceeding until you go to ratepayers and have a community meeting. But you can't go to ratepayers without hard evidence to
A
show them
base.
what the rate will be.
You need a-
So
you need
it's
a
the
base.
chicken or the egg. It's going to be a little of both at the same time.
so
You
basic.
won't make a final decision on rates until after you have the community meetings.
So basically what we'll do is we'll say, here's where we think we want to go.
Correct.
And we'll get public input and we'll either validate that or cause us to change direction at the end of the day.
You got it.
So you said next meeting, that'll be next week?
No, the next meeting with Raftellus.
Oh, okay, you just said okay.
Sorry.
Okay, just wanted to clear that up.
Robin, we still need to set that date, so that's also something we need to work out with you guys to make sure that we can do that sooner than later.
Is that the date we were talking
Yes.
about? Okay, okay. And Gary, I know you said about going to the senior center. We have to be a little careful over there because a lot of those people that come there, they all don't live in Lower Paxton Township.
Correct.
And we don't want to confuse them that they think they're getting a bill and they
Right.
live in West
They have to
Hanover or
understand,
Susquehanna.
yeah, they do
So
have to
you
understand
need to make
it's
sure
Lower
when we go
Paxton Township.
that when we
Yes,
go over
exactly.
there, so.
They're
okay.
welcome to contribute if they like.
Yeah.
I don't think they would like that.
And Robin, the only reason I suggest it was because it's another core of
Right,
people
of-
who may miss it via other avenues of our
Yep.
dissemination of data.
I just want to make sure, because our senior center is a Dauphin County Senior Center, it is not Lower Paxton Township Senior Center, so.
Leanne, do you have anything further on this issue?
Well, just, Mr. Chairman, we should just plug the website again, because as you can tell, things are up in the air and things are changing and things are going to change. The dates are going to be posted. And as the consultants provide more data, you know, there needs to be a clearinghouse for this. So if you go to the township website, there's a nice big banner right in the middle, and you click on that. And so since things are coming in and moving, that'll be your clearinghouse to keep up on things.
And I know, again, that's the way of getting out to the residents, but I'm going to go back to our older residents. You know, we need to contact them somehow because they don't have, you know, Facebook, they're not
We
into
can't
the
contact
website.
them each one by one. We
I
can
know,
tell
but
them when
we-
there's going to
yeah.
be meetings.
Right,
And
right.
things like that. And my mom's 87, and she's on the internet, so don't sell them short.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people that aren't.
Well, we'll use all of the communication vehicles available to us over and over and over again to communicate this. With that, is there any member of the public who would like to comment or ask a question? Yes, sir. Don't go too far, Leanne. You're up again after this.
Don't go far.
Don't.
John Trish, 600 Prince Street. As a retired military enlisted man, Mr. Zuma. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the ride. My first question is, I went on the website. I thought Rotella was going to be here tonight. That's why I'm here. When they're doing their calculations for this fee, are they doing the calculations based on the 3.6 million that is estimated that we need each year?
Which calculation you talking about, Mr. Trish?
The fee calculation.
The calculation of expenditures will be based upon that initial estimate, yes.
Okay, so currently the township residents are paying 2/3 of that fee. So basically, instead of this being a fee, it's going to be a tax increase, even though it's called a fee, because we are currently paying, if I read the information correctly, 2.5 million a year, and we've been paying that, from what I understand, for the last 10 years. Is that correct? Or am I wrong?
It's been in the budget.
Some of the costs that you're referring to, yes, are currently being paid for by the township as part of its general fund
Out
budget.
of the general fund, which is our tax dollars.
Correct.
So
There,
that needs to be told to the public. The second question is, I've talked to, in the last 3 weeks, 6 or 7 senior citizen couples who were not even aware that this was being discussed or has been being discussed. And I asked them if they got their flyer and their sewer bill, and they said they didn't even look at it, they just threw it in the trash.
well,
Now,
you know,
I asked
we
at the
can't
last
make people
meeting-
read.
I asked at the last meeting if anything was coming out on the sewer, and the answer at that time was there's nothing scheduled. But when I looked at the schedule for the meeting tonight, this was scheduled. It had Rep Tellis. When you,
Mr. Trish, this has been put on the agenda this evening by me as an update to the Board of Supervisors. This is not part of the public meeting. This is an opportunity for staff to inform the board of where we are to date. We are working with Raftellus to set up not only community meetings with stakeholders, but with residential meetings as well. Those dates will be scheduled in the very near future. We don't have the dates or times yet, and as we've told you before, we will certainly make sure that they are adequately advertised.
I understand that, but okay, I'll reiterate this. When is there going to be a news conference or a public conference or a news reporter that reports that Lower Paxton is investigating or looking into charging a stormwater fee for their residents?
We cannot answer that question because we do not control the news media.
Okay, fine. Okay,
Now, what we can tell you is what Leanne just outlined, that a series of stakeholder meetings and public meetings will be occurring in September and October, and those things we will advertise through every vehicle available to us.
okay. In the packet on the website, it said that if there's a single tier, a person wouldn't be needed, but if there was a double tier, we'd have to hire an additional person for $80,000. So that's going to have to be included into the fee. And then if there's a separate fee and a credit for those big organizations that have sediment ponds or stormwater ponds, they may or may not get a credit. And I think we need to know that also before any decision is made.
And we're going to do all that in
And
this
I think-
series of stakeholder meetings and public meetings that we are going to hold, yes.
And I think if my first statement tonight is true, that they're going to be charging a fee for the entire 3.6 million, because I've been here over 25 years. And in that 25 years, I know there's been over 3, 4, 5,000 houses built in this township. Building the tax base, and so I'm just concerned for all the citizens, and I don't want a tax increase.
While there will be no tax increase as a result of this, we are talking about a stormwater fee, and it's actually to the benefit of residential property owners that we do a fee rather than cover this through additional property taxes, because it spreads the cost out over more ratepayers than there are taxpayers. So we have selected this option particularly with residential ratepayers in mind. It will be to your benefit to do it in this manner. And all the developers disregard what I just said.
To my understanding, the taxpayers have been paying for the last 10 years their 2/3% of what you're going to increase in this fee. And the second thing, Mr. Henry, the nonprofits and government buildings have not been paying a dime.
That would be correct.
Okay, so
Would be correct.
that's additional money that we're going to receive.
Correct.
And it started out, there was a number floated out at 48 a quarter, then it went to 52 a quarter, then I saw a document somewhere that said
Never went
32
that
a quarter.
Oh, no,
It
no.
didn't go that high. It was
No,
32
no.
to 40.
I'm just trying to remember the best I can, Miss Lindsay.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, if Rotellus is doing the analyzation for the full 3.6 million, and we're already paying 2/3 of that, the way I went in math school, it would be a raise. A tax increase.
Any additional public comment or questions?
I want to thank you for your service. Thank you.
More welcome, it's my pleasure. I said I had 20 years in 1 year, 8 months. I don't want to have 20 years in 1 year and 2 months.
Well, that's great. Ms. Urban, we have you for another item which is far more pleasant, I think, to discuss than the stormwater fee.
Mr. Chairman, before we let Ms. Urban talk, I'd like to show, we're talking about a special event. Leanne and others on staff are planning a special event. I would just like to show you a brief clip of the last special event, National Night Out for Public Safety, which Leanne prepared and posted on our website. And I don't know if I'll get sound, but we'll get video.
Okay.
A recent community event board members, Leanne is here to talk to us about a fall event which may have be as much fun and have a similar format.
I believe I was here a month ago, 2 months ago, and we talked about a fall festival. The fall festival the planning is underway, and it's set for Saturday, November 3rd at George Park. We've been toying with a few things with the time due to lighting issues in the fall. Has potential to be 4:30 to 8:30 or 5:30 to 9:30, so we're going to stand by on that part. But the items that we have confirmed are a costume parade, food trucks, inflatables, hay rides. We're hoping to have two hay rides going at the same time this year. Music and free candy. The hay rides, as in past years, will be $3 a person, and there is potential for other smaller community activities that will occur, but what I've stated are the actually confirmed things that the township will be providing. Right now I'm in the process of creating the PR pieces for the event, the logo, flyers, and I'm working with Barb at the Friendship Center and Parks and Rec Department to put this together.
I know in the past we've charged for the hay rides. Is there any way that we don't have to charge? Because like when we did the 250th, everything was free to the public. When, with the National Night Out, everything was free to the public again. So we're, trying to get as much community involvement, and I hate for a little kid to come and then the parent finds out that, and they don't have any cash with them. Is there a reason why we're charging the $3 per person?
To be honest, from my standpoint, that's what I was told was done in the past, so it's the only.
Okay.
It's been a revenue that the Parks and Recreation Department has relied on for more years than I've been here. There's always been some charge for pumpkin carving and hay rides. It's the Board of Supervisors actually mandated the charge years ago, just because it was been the board's opinion that township programs, and this is a program, should pay for themselves.
Okay. I just feel bad that, we're trying to get the community out and then we end up charging Do you know what the revenue, what that was that we brought in for
Oh,
those?
no, I don't know, but there'll be charges, the food trucks that will be there will also be for charge.
Yeah.
I mean, this
That
is
would-
not
That what you
going,
would expect, I'm just,
yeah, this is not going to be a free event. There will be charges there if people so choose to incur them. We also did not budget for this event. This was one that we decided to do mid-year. So the board can make whatever decision it wants and direct staff accordingly. I'm just answering the question of why.
do you understand where I'm coming from, guys?
Yep.
I mean, I just feel bad if some kids are getting on the hayride, the other kids, the parents don't have the money, and, we're trying to make it a community, a community event. And I have been out to the hayrides and the pumpkin carving, and I know we do have a good, turnout. I'm just looking for a family that thought they were coming there. And the food truck that's understandable that you're going to have to pay, at the 250th, they knew that ahead of time. So it's just my concern.
Are we charging the food trucks a fee to be there?
Yes.
And that fee is going to cover what expenses then?
It's a very nominal fee, but
It's a very nominal fee. It's,
$50 or $100.
yeah, we won't make, if we have 10 food trucks, we won't make $1,000.
My thought is, what if we charge them $35 or $40 and use that money to pay for pumpkins and hayride? Would that work? Or would we scare away the food trucks?
I don't know if you scare away the food trucks, but you do have, you do have an established fee. You'd have to change your fee schedule.
Well, what are we talking about for the hayride?
$3 per person.
Per person. So if you have a family of 4, you're talking $12. And a lot of young people don't carry cash. And I don't think we take debit card at the hayride.
But what does it actually cost us to have the hayride?
To some extent, we get the tractor part is the townships, and then they get the trailer part donated, and then we purchase the hay that goes into so I don't know the actual.
George had just said that it's like a fundraiser for the Parks and Recreation.
Well, board members, I wasn't at all prepared for this question. I
Yeah,
can tell
that's
you
okay.
that. Yeah, and that's not a problem. I don't know. Again, staff has always operated the pumpkin carving and hay rides as a program activity, which has always operated under the premise that it had to break even for us to have it. I'm not saying that it generates a lot of money. It pays for its cost.
The cost.
All right.
It's a good, and you did not know. This was just general information, but it's a good, I think, discussion to have. But if in theory, if you want to do more things where there's no fee, you're probably going to have fewer things because it's you're just going to make these events more expensive. So it's a trade-off, and it's worthy of discussion.
Why don't we continue the discussion then, and maybe you can take a look and see if there is an economic model where the fees for trucks, et cetera, might cover pumpkins and hay rides. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
I don't want it to limit the number of these special events we can do.
No, we don't want to do
But
that.
Yeah, because the more community outreach, and that's what we
We
saw with
we
the
need more of
Why
the
don't you let us?
250th.
Yeah, we'll gather some more information and put it on the September workshop meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I'm sorry, George.
No, it's.
Did we
I-
get
I
all the
just-
information?
I feel unable to answer your questions
okay.
without
That's okay.
being very general.
This is a workshop, and questions are going to arise.
I'm just looking back at the 250th. I mean, there was probably,
Right,
what,
that's true.
2,000 people there? I know we're not going to get that here, but the more outreach we can do with the community.
I will just some general comments. The more you make free, the more people that will show up, which is
Yeah.
great.
Right,
But the more help you will need, the more expense it will cost.
right.
So we aren't set up to do National Night Out type events on a quarterly basis here. I mean, doing that one time a year, we're doing the 250th one for that one 250th anniversary.
Every 250 years.
Yes. What was a very big event for staff. That's not to say we shouldn't be doing it. I'm just saying that if the board's going to do more of that in the future, you're going to need more help
And is there any
internally.
way we can reach out to the residents, because lots of people always want to volunteer?
Absolutely.
You know, that we could reach out to the residents, somehow contacting them again through the website, social media, but to ask for volunteers.
Oh, absolutely, and volunteers are essential, but coordinating the volunteers is a huge effort in and of itself. So, again, we've never done much of this. We're not set up for it. That doesn't mean we can't be. It's just a discussion we need to have.
See, you should have just stuck to my Halloween parade and you wouldn't have as.
It's logistics, it's staff, and it's money.
Okay, well, why don't we, since we're not really prepared to have this discussion tonight, go back and look at some numbers, and we can hold it over to next month.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay, thanks, Lynn.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Wolf, we had some stormwater system issues due to recent wet weather.
Yes, board members, you have had some recent wet weather and some stormwater issues, and you've had several residents who are probably in the audience who want to discuss their specific stormwater issue with you tonight. Between July 21st and July 25th, we had an emergency declaration in Lower Township. We had wet weather that is easily the third, if not more than the third worst event in the last 20 years. The worst event that I can remember in Lower Paxton Township was in 2011. This didn't quite make 2011, but it came close. And here's a sample and we're going to start out the presentation by just some general pictures showing you what staff has been faced with. We also have provided you electronically, but also it would be very difficult to read electronically, giving you hard copies of 4 spreadsheets based upon the type of complaint that staff has addressed. And multiple people from staff have been addressing complaints. The sewer department has received complaints. We have received complaints in the administrative office. Randy Allen, our engineering technician, and Jeff Klein, Public Works Director, have addressed a lot of the Public Works stormwater complaints and complaints that have occurred on private properties, and they're here to also assist us in this discussion this evening. What I'm displaying is just an example of the magnitude. This is Old Colonial Road, coming off of Colonial Road as it exists today, right before Goose Valley Road where the truck is parked. This road was completely inundated with water, and the water caused the damage that you see. And I can move on as soon as I...
There's a creek there and it came up over?
Guys, the microphone. I assume, Jeff, it was way over the guardrail at that point.
Well, we weren't there when it was actually happening, but it came up over top of through the guardrail anyway, and buried the road pretty much, took the road with it.
Old Colonial Road at this point is still closed. There, and this is a very short road that serves either some residential properties or as a shortcut. Right. But it's not presenting any emergency services quandary at this point in time. I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. This is a stormwater facility at abuts which development, gentlemen?
That's by Shoup Cemetery. That's part of the land we just purchased along Oak Park.
Board members, this was a private stormwater facility put in by a private developer many years ago. Lower Paxton Township purchased this land in 2017 as part of its Greenway project along the Oak Park Road down through to Pinnacle project, and this happens to be on it. This is ours. And you can see that someday it's going to need attention. Mm-hmm. I'm going to show several pictures of private properties where there's been stormwater failures. There's a a private property with an inlet in its yard, and you can see the pipe has blown up at the conjunction with the inlet. And we can certainly go back to these at other points in time. We're just trying to set the stage. Fairway Estates, gentlemen? Is that correct? Yes.
Is that on Dunmore, Randy?
That's on
Okay.
Dunmore.
All right, where I had been, okay.
Closer look at the hole. Here's a stormwater facility in a yard that certainly doesn't meet today's construction standards. It's one that is problematic to the property owner.
Did we put that in, or did the builder put that in?
Most likely, there's no record of who put it in. I would not think that the township did, but Jeff, would you have any?
I'm sure.
The history is spotty right now. This was done in the mid-'80s, and there's no records. We're told that the pipe was there before both this property and the one across the street were built, and amendments were made to it. I'm not sure. This homeowner says the township extended it.
There's no way of knowing.
No.
All we can tell you is that there's no public easement or right-of-way for this. No deed of dedication.
The pipe goes from the other side of the road to this side.
So it's on private property.
It's on private, well, some's in the right of way and some's private property.
Board members, you can see a little garden here. Location of this one?
This is on Nancy Drive, which is off of Feezer.
You can see right over here, a wall hidden by the snow fence. And on the other side of the snow fence is a sinkhole.
Yeah, that stormwater is on the private property there, and that's a manhole that the garden was on top of, and we're not sure whether it was a manhole or the pipe that failed. So that's it extends down and empties into a ravine to the right here.
Our pipe?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
Again, this would be on a property without a stormwater easement that's been accepted by the township.
And the garden's on top of the manhole.
Yes.
Okay.
An odd place to put a garden.
You can see the manhole right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Creative.
This one's doesn't show a significant amount of damage, but it's a good description of stormwater facilities in Lower Paxton Township. I'm sorry, I went too fast here. Oh, no, I'm still there. Okay. Back to the catch basin. Catch basin, probably in public right-of-way. The catch basin, and there's been some failure here, isn't the real problem. From this catch basin, there's a pipe that extends the whole way to the rear of this property. It may go underneath the garage. It goes into a gully or a ravine in the back. There's no public easement for this pipe. The township's position has always been that its maintenance responsibility ends at the right-of-way. Location of that one?
This is Gibble Street, right? Mountain View Elementary would be right to the left
Oh,
here.
yeah, okay.
That's the dead end.
World is that?
This is a bad one.
This is a bad one. This is on private property, somebody's rear yard.
Side yard, yeah, this is on Hidden Lake Drive off of Country Lake. I will tell you, that's about 10 by 10 by 10 feet deep.
Wow.
Randy, is that the one I called you about, that I had gotten a call? Okay.
Actually, that's a picture on day one. Picture on day two, you can see there's been some expansion.
And is that on private property or was in the right of way?
It's on private property.
It is, okay.
We did put the fence up for safety.
Okay. Thank you for going out, I appreciate it.
I can tell you that Jeff and Randy have been spending a lot of time out in the last 2 weeks. In fact, I don't know if you spent any time in. This is in Hunt Club?
This is Hunt Club. In fact, this gentleman's here
Oh,
tonight.
yeah, that's Michael's.
This is Mr. Suhanic. In December, the pipe failed out by the sidewalk in our right-of-way. We fixed that then, and when we fixed that, we saw that there was going to be more issues as it went on to private property, and sure enough, there was. This is Mr. Suhanic fixing this, which I
Yeah, these are
had a
municipal pieces of equipment or a municipal project. This is the property owner fixing the private pipe on his property.
So did our pipe cause the issue on his line?
No, it's just continued
Board-
deterioration
yeah.
of metal pipe.
Board members, it's not a cause and effect. It's a public-private system. And it's all the same age. And when something in that system fails, when ours failed, it's most likely that the rest of the system is in bad shape too. Much of this is corrugated metal pipe. If you get 20 years out of corrugated metal pipe without the bottom rusting out, you've done very well. Beaver Road.
Beaver Road.
This is a sinkhole. This actually is in right-of-way, and this actually is a township pipe here. But further south on Beaver Road, towards the barn, that pipe leaves the right-of-way and discharges through the small farm field on private property, and it's then a private pipe.
This also caused Beaver Road to buckle, and we had to repair a large section.
I don't think
This is Row Lane, which is in out by Rockford Heights, Englewood Heights.
Off of
It's
Blue
called.
Ridge.
This is between Englewood Heights and Rockford Heights in a backyard. There's an easement. It basically, this pipe takes the water from the one detention pond, and I think then takes it goes east or west here and out into the drainage system in Rockford.
Board members, these are by no means are all the pictures, and these certainly aren't all the issues that have been identified in the spreadsheets that you have before you. What we are attempting to show you is that there's a significant amount of deterioration in what we have always termed as private stormwater facilities. These are pipes that exit municipal streets or serve the development in some other fashion. They are sometimes in an easement, but in most cases, if they are in an easement, that easement was never dedicated to or accepted by the township. Staff has always been told that these are private facilities, and we've never done any maintenance on that pipe, as you can see. There's a multitude of these in existence. And board members, I'm not here asking you for any decision in regard to this tonight. I know that there's individuals in the audience who would like to talk about their specific situation. And I would offer board members that at some point in the future, maybe as a future road tour, we pick some of the worst and go look at them as well. So from that, myself and Jeff and Randy can answer questions. Jeff and Randy can go item by item on the spreadsheets. That's not a problem. You can hear from individuals who may want to talk to you about their specific problem as well. I'm not sure how you want to take this. I just ask at this point.
I just have a question. You said that staff has always been told. So who is telling the staff?
the documentation that exists is telling the staff. There's no record of municipal ownership. For municipal ownership to occur, there has to be an acceptance by the municipality of the facility. Acceptance can occur through a deed of dedication. Acceptance can occur depending upon how a plan is recorded. Acceptance can occur by actually performing maintenance on the pipe. There are a ton of these that the township is not even aware of, that we've never maintained, that are, in my mind, private property. Board members, if this one or some of the other ones that I showed you, if you chose to do something, the first thing you would need is a right-of-way or easement to enter onto the property, because you can't go on private property. Mr. Stein may want to jump in here.
The second-class township code provides that if at some point in time the township wants to take over previously private facilities, you can acquire them, whether it's by deed of dedication, eminent domain, or purchasing it. So it is possible to acquire these things, but once you acquire them, you have to fix them and continue to maintain them.
And the documentation, George, did that come from like a future board that they had decided? Where's, you said it's
There is none.
documentation?
There is no documentation.
Oh, I thought you said the
No,
documentation.
there has to be document. If you recall back at a couple of recent meetings, you've accepted streets.
Right,
There's a resolution, there's a deed of dedication, there's a release of liens, and there's a legal description. That's the formal way we do it now. If you go in past records, it's been done less formally. It's been done a resolution and a name of a street on a plan. That's still an acceptance. For that facility that I'm displaying on the screen, there's no acceptance. There's no reference any place in any municipal record, on any deed, any place that has been accepted by Lower Paxton Township as a public facility.
Do we have any idea as to the extent, the number of situations such as this that may exist in the township?
No, not a specific number. We know that in most neighborhoods, especially the older ones, the pipe leaves the right of way and goes through yards. Do I have a number? No, because some of them we're not even sure. Randy and I, this one here, we walked through both neighborhoods today trying to figure out where it went.
So our policy has been that if it's in our right-of-way, we fix it, but if it's on private property, that's the property owner's responsibility.
Yes.
So if we wanted to change the policy, we are not sure how many such situations we are going to be getting into.
Correct.
I can tell you that there are a significant number. There are whole neighborhoods, and Fairway Estates is a prime example, with stormwater systems in rear yards that have never been accepted by the township. In fact, in Fairway Estates, there are on the plan stormwater easements. Those easements haven't been accepted, but the pipe that I showed you earlier isn't even in the easement.
And one specific one I remember we visited on a road tour was one where all the properties in Fairway bordered on the country club.
Yeah, if board members, we walked Dunmore, top to the catch basin at the bottom, and then from the bottom out again to Fairway Drive.
Right. That's been.
Okay, that might have been.
That was before me, so that was 5.5 years, yeah.
And we walked the easement area, and we located the pipe. And in many locations, the pipe was 30, 40 feet outside the easement area. At that time, the pipe on the southern part of Dunmore was failing. It was on, I think, Mr. McDonald's property. And then there was the stormwater for 2 detention basins, and they were in need of significant maintenance at that point. detention basins are also an issue, and Lower Paxton Township has how many, Randy?
170?
Not an exact number.
Not exact, yeah, we have a few of them.
More than 150?
Yes.
Probably about that. Maybe a little more.
If there are 150, we probably have ownership rights to 10.
But George, the
The
one that we
town.
were talking about, that's contiguous with the country club, where that water was draining down into that retention pond, didn't the owner have that retention pond, and didn't he or she maintain that and kept it? And that's
The
what I
owner did
recall
do
from our
maintenance,
visit.
yes, after we went, and yes, the owner did.
But they were actually caring for and repairing, replenish, et cetera, of that retention basin.
And I can show you examples of many property owners that maintain detention basins, both residential and commercial. And I can show you just as many examples of ones that aren't properly maintained. Detention basins are a whole nother MS4 issue, which staff will be working on, and our approach will be to tell property owners, this is a private facility, you're responsible for maintaining it.
When residents purchase houses, is there anything through the purchasing that they get that tells them you are responsible, especially if they buy a house with a drain in the backyard, that they are responsible for
You're
that?
responsible for everything on the property.
No, but a lot of people think because there's a drain, it's a township issue. And I think residents, as they're purchasing properties,
Well,
they need to know.
Residents should know that the stormwater line on their property, the water line on their property, the stormwater facilities on their property are not owned by the township, the authority, or Suez. Then Suez just sent out this most recent mailer in regard to insurance for underground pipes on properties. Not that I'm advocating for that, but I get it every quarter, and I'm sure most of the township residents get that as well. These are private facilities, and these facilities in many locations in Lower Paxton are failing.
The real estate agent needs to let them know that they are responsible, when it's on their property.
Well, that's not under our control.
I know,
Right.
I know, but they're calling and they think that we should be.
Well,
Buyers need to ask sellers.
What,
Or developers.
well, that's something that the real estate community would have to deal with. You mentioned that there might be members of the public who wish to comment.
Yes.
To move along, are there any members of the public who wish to comment? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium. Give us your name and address, ma'am, as well.
My name is Michael Sahanic, and I reside at 1646 Whitley Drive. And that was one of the pictures was of our place. But
Sir, if you do, okay, I'll go back to it if you don't mind.
I'm sorry.
That the one with the equipment? Yeah.
Yes. So I prepared notes. I'm an accountant by training, so that's just my nature. I timed myself, and it's going to be 4 minutes. So I understand it's a long meeting. So first, I want to thank the township supervisors for giving me this opportunity to at least talk about it and present it from our perspective, my wife's and my perspective, of what we're dealing with, what we've been dealing with on this issue. But before I do that, I also want to let you know, and it's probably more for Mr. Wolf, how responsive your team has been when we have had issues, particularly last fall and last winter, with our first sinkhole, how responsive in the area of the easement, where it is your responsibility, townships, they've been very responsive. Jeff and his team have been really good to work with, and I do applaud them. And I know oftentimes you don't get that, but I cannot say they have not been anything other than representing this township very well in our case. So now for our situation that a little bit was shared, stormwater pipes that relieve a significant part of our development run through our property. Last fall, as I said, we had developed an initial sinkhole on Whitley Drive adjacent to the curbing, which was within the, and I may be saying this wrong, but the easement area that would be the responsibility of the township to remediate. They responded, put a section of pipe in there, and as Jeff Klein said, they saw things that we're probably more at risk going forward for going back deeper into the yard. Everything seemed to be fine until we started having these significant rains. We came home from vacation and we saw our second sinkhole, which we tried to remediate by putting some dirt in, and it just kept getting worse from there. And I was told at that time when I talked to Jeff, and very courteously, Mike, this is where ours ends and this is where yours starts. So, we had a sense from that conversation that from that point on back to the catch basin, which is 120 linear feet, that was going to be on us, that if anything happens. So with the more recent 17.5 inches of rain, it only got worse. And that sinkhole, a third sinkhole appeared, and after consulting with a contractor, a local contractor, we made the decision to replace 120 linear feet of that storm pipe, the stormwater pipe, so that it doesn't get any worse. Plus, to be very frank, it's a safety concern. I mean, we've got grandchildren, we have neighbors, kids that go through the yard, and sometimes I'm on my tractor. And we didn't want any more sinkholes. So we have taken the initiative to do that. It's essentially done except for reclaiming and fixing our irrigation system and reseeding. So we're moving that along, but I guess I'm concerned as a 45-year resident of the township, and I will tell you this is my first meeting. I'm almost embarrassed to say that I have not been engaged. A lot of things were discussed tonight by Mr. Wolf about dedication, and I'm not sure if there's anything you can do to remedy it or provide support to what we've incurred. I don't know, and I'd like to find out a little bit more about this dedication process because, in my deed it talks about a 30-foot easement for sewer and for stormwater, but as I said, I'm an accountant. I don't really understand that. But my ask would be if there's anything that this township could do in the way of communicating or getting that information out or even helping with remediation, it would be greatly appreciated, certainly by us. And, it's unfortunate. And not to work against myself, but I said to my wife, we could live in California. we could, as bad as it is,
Or Palmyra.
we could live, that's right, but I'm talking in California where people are coming back and they ain't nothing there. It is all gone. So I think we're on the path of fixing it, but I would just respectfully ask if there's anything that this township could do in situations like this to provide support, some kind of support to residents. So they're my comments, Mr. Chairman. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
A comment and a question. The comment is, thank you very much for working with us.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Mr.
But
Custer.
number two, in all of this that's going on, and I'm going to guess I know the answer, but I'll ask you anyway. I'm guessing there are no assurances that if we have another continuous rain, that you're not going to wind up with another sinkhole. I don't know, but has anyone been able to give you any information? And I'm guessing Jeff wouldn't know, but I see all the work that you're doing and the money that's being spent. Do any of those people have any expertise or knowledge to say that because of the ground fault there, that this may occur again? Because as we see other places within central Pennsylvania, we have these and they reoccur even though they're filled and they occur again. Just like down at Tangier, all of a sudden we've got a parking lot going down because of this rain. So I'm concerned for you because what you're doing may not be an end.
I think it's an end. I think we can confidently say that it's an end to what happened in the initial phase back to the catch basin. So the 120 to 130 linear feet. But from that catch basin, it goes back into another section of our yard where that could be, there could be problems at that surface there. Surface, it's no pun intended. That's it's a bad use of, but to answer your question, I think there's some risk there. I just don't know how much. I have no idea until something occurs or
Exactly.
appears, or not. We may be fortunate enough that this is going to remedy it, and the flow of water will be fine, and the stormwater pipe will last longer than that initial phase, which I think took an awful lot of pressure coming down through the street. So I don't know what else my ask would be, but it's.
Well, is it, sir, so you're asking for compensation? Are you hoping for some?
I don't know if there's any special fund for support or compensation for that. I got to tell you, that would certainly make my first meeting so wonderful that to experience. But if not in the past, is there something that the township can do to educate, to dedicate, to do some of those things, accept dedication, so that the residents and then taxpayers aren't exposed? We're fortunate that we could bear this, and I shouldn't probably say that, but I'm betting that there's a lot of residents in this township that if this happened on their lot, on their property, they would really be financially hard. It would be a hardship. It would be a terrible hardship to them, and I would like not to see that as a concerned citizen. So, just something to take and absorb.
Thank you very, very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This guy's
Ma'am?
nice.
My name is Artie Williams, and I live at 5006 Nancy Drive.
Oh, okay.
Mr.
Could you move the
Yes.
microphone down just a little bit? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, much better, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman and Board, thank you so much for letting us come and tell you about it. My little sinkhole, mine's a garden, but my little sinkhole started in February. We were in Haiti on a mission trip, and when we came home, well, our neighbor texted us and said, they're digging in the yard. And right beside the storm drain, which I didn't even know was there, they were digging up the sewer. There was a sewer blockage. And at the same time, right after we got home, when they were working on the sewer, there appeared a little hole, sinkhole, behind the garden. And we talked, I think, with Mr. Klein. Eventually, because we didn't know what to do. We've never had this. I was given, when I bought the townhouse, I wasn't given any inkling that I owned a storm drain for the whole neighborhood and the township roads. Probably wouldn't have bought it if I'd have known I was supplying that for everyone. But anyway, they told us, contractor, I have Larry Peterson here, our contractor, and Mr. Klein both suggested that we fill the hole with rocks, and probably it would be fine, and it was fine. And then all of a sudden we noticed a little hole coming up in a garden. And that just grew and grew and grew. I've lived there for 20 years. The only inkling that I had pertaining to a storm drain was that in the papers that I was given, it said no fence, or wait just a minute. All drainage swales and stormwater drainage easements as shown on a subdivision plan shall be maintained by the individual unit owners, plural, a manner as to not hinder or impede the flow of any stormwater. I knew I would never impede it. And any of the maps that we were given was not what Mr. Klein came down and showed us. We just had, they gave us 3 copies over to here. So I had no idea of a little note that said on the top, individual lot owners shall be responsible for the ownership and maintenance of the storm drain facility located in their lot. Had no idea. Now it has gotten so big. And I guess the thing that, as the gentleman said, I would like to see somehow other people need to know this. I lived in the country all my life till I moved to Harrisburg. First time in my life in a city. Never dreaming that I owned a storm drain. Do I have the money to fix it? It's gonna really super hurt. But people need to be aware of it. But I would really appreciate it if someone would come and TV that to see if anything came when they were digging up the sewer, if it did anything to the storm drain, because it happened at exactly the same time. Up to that point, we had no problem. But when they dug that up, it opened up at the same time. And Larry was over at the house. He was working at the house, and he went down. There was very strong smell of sewer, wasn't there, Larry? Where the storm drain had opened up. And we thought we had had it solved, and as you can see now, I've lost my garden, and it just keeps getting bigger. But I'd really appreciate anything that you could do. If you could TV it, let us know what the problem is, because we have no idea what to do with it and how to fix it. And we need some help from the township. And anything you give us, we'd really appreciate it. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just have a question. I don't live far from you, and I didn't know they were replacing the sewers back there. Suez is replacing all the water along Locust Lane. They just did Franklin. I didn't know they were, because I'm just in the development right past you, and I didn't realize, Jeff, I didn't realize they were replacing the sewers back there.
Well, I think the first thing you said was your neighbor had a problem, right? It was,
What was the problem? My husband has his hand up. Can he answer that, Jeff?
Come up to the podium, sir, please, so we can hear you.
I'm a little old country girl that only had a septic tank. But I love Harrisburg.
Lower Paxton.
Lower Paxton.
Mr. Chairman and Board of Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak. What happened between 4017 Cheryl, this happened one time before, had a backup. We have a sewer line that goes between our house between 4025 and 5006 Nancy. There is a sewer right away through there for the township. And what happened before was there was a problem that backed up to Mr. James' house at 4017, I believe it is. And then at that time, the township came out, the same manhole between our homes, dug it up, and it was plastic PVC, 8-inch. And the problem was, at the time, they replaced it. And then it was tamped, and when they tamped it pretty hard because the house was even shaking. Like the pictures on the walls, and even my neighbors brought it up. That was a few years ago. And then from what I understand, it egg-shaped, and they ran a video camera in there, and they had to redig it up. So Rogel at that time did that work. And years later after that, they patched everything up, and they put my neighbor's driveway in, and we're so close there. And they came back when we were in Haiti. We came back the 20th of February this year, and the 24th I reported it to the township. I noticed when there was a hole after the sewer was dug up, they told me it was dug up at night. And I don't know if they may have caught the pipe or what they may have happened. It's I don't know. That's why I wanted to get it videotaped, cameraed, just to see what's going on. And then the hole got bigger and bigger. And like my wife did say, there was a sewer smell there, but then it went away. But now we gardened there for years. Now all of a sudden we got this hole and there's a manhole exposed. We never even knew that was there. And it had to be over 20 years buried there. So we don't know what failed or what happened. We're just in a predicament because now the situation is or my neighbor's going to get a new driveway because they put a track hoe down her driveway like they did before, and they're going to pave her driveway. But the problem now is, yeah, there's about a 24-inch storm drain pipe that goes through there, but it's so tight and so close. If we would be responsible and have to repair everything from the street back, I counted it off today at about maybe 140 feet or so of pipe would be, and then it crisscrosses over from her detention pond and then exits into the woods. You know, and then it's like, if I do anything, then the problem is that she may come back on me for digging in her yard, because all the utilities and stuff as far as electrical and communication are there too, along the driveway, and our property's so tight. So, you know, I've been doing this work for 29 years, so, you know, I know we used to videotape pipes and we used to replace pipes and stuff, but it's just a concern of mine. You know, it's what do you do? We're taking the stormwater from everybody in the Feezer development, Easy Street, Cheryl, and Nancy Drive. It comes down between our properties. And like my wife says, we didn't know we were responsible for it. Had no idea. Now we got a huge hole. And it's like I said to Mr. Klein, I was concerned because of the public, you know, with the kids and the animals that run back through there. They'd come back on me if something happens. So I've tried to talk to Mr. Jeff, Mr. Knoll, you know, and I just don't know what to do. Or my wife doesn't know what to do. We're just so tight between the yards.
Was there sewer work done recently in their yard or the next?
In the neighbor's yard, yeah.
In the neighbor's yard?
Repairing.
Yes,
I was
that's
going to
why.
say, because I didn't think we replaced the sewers back there, so it was just an issue that
It
we.
was an individual
okay,
issue
okay.
that our sewer department, I guess Rogel was working for them. That's
And-
why I said eventually I came into this.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were dealing with Tim Nolt for most of it. And then, because of it being a storm pipe, they called me.
So the manhole that was uncovered, was it a stormwater or a sanitary sewer?
Stormwater.
Stormwater.
Well,
But there was work done, there was sanitary sewer work done
In the neighbor's yard.
in the neighbor's yard.
And it's right near this.
Is it possible that that work created the type of vibration that would have collapsed the?
I can't answer that. That's what Ken feels. Yeah, and so.
Do we have an engineer who could look into that?
That's what we'd
Tim.
like to have checked. That's what we'd like to have checked.
What?
Because it just seems so strange that at the same time they were digging the sewer up, the hole appeared. Exact same time. Now, it has gotten bigger, but at the same time, it just seems like a coincidence between the sewer being dug up and our hole appearing. And
I'll
I've
have the
lived
sewer
there for
department
20
check.
years.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I think the sewer department needs to check into this.
I'll
It
check.
sounds like there's a strong potential here of a cause and effect.
There are 3 pipes involved. There's a rogue pipe coming over from the neighbor also. They should probably all be televised. The sewer department, we don't have television equipment in Public
Right.
Works. The sewer does. However,
That was ours.
the outfall is hard to get at. So being private property, we
Well,
would need
it-
direction there.
It could be private property, but George will have the sewer department look into this if
Board,
if it could have been a cause and effect.
board members, we will look into it. I would highly doubt if it's 8-inch PVC sewer and it's been repaired, something's blowing out here and it's not the sewer line. But we will check. I will have it
Let's
checked.
check.
Yes.
Yeah.
excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That pipe has the 8-inch PVC was taken out and a 40-foot piece of iron ductile was replaced because of that.
The
Now you
sanitary
have-
sewer.
There's an 8-inch, 40-foot long piece of iron ductile pipe that replaced that part of the PVC that they had issues with. That's what they have in that line right now
Okay.
for the sewer.
Well, our next step, as Mr. Wolf has indicated, will be to have the sewer department come out, camera it, try to figure out what's happening.
I would greatly appreciate that before that driveway was put in.
we'll come out and we'll check the sanitary sewer.
Yes,
Right.
Yes.
yes,
The
yes, the sanitary sewer.
Right.
Correct. And then you don't have equipment to televise the stormwater.
We don't. I believe the sewer department would help us there. However, like I said earlier, the outfall is hard to get at with their equipment. And I think that might be the problem here, because
Okay.
this is leading out.
Right.
If it's at the hole here, and they usually are,
Uh-huh.
it's leading out and down into a ravine. They can't get their truck down in there.
No.
So,
Well, let's take step one.
We will.
Let's take step one, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Sure. Would anybody else like to discuss any of these issues with us? Okay,
And
well,
if you have any suggestions for us, please let us know, but thank you very much.
well, thank you for being here. Thank you. And thank you for all of your extra hard work these last few weeks. As the rain event has caused a lot of problems. Fortunately, not as many problems for us as other municipalities, but problems nonetheless. Okay, at this time, we have a request from Triple Crown Corporation to modify the Park Place Final Subdivision Plan, and Mr. Mark DeSanto is here. Mark?
Good evening, Mark DeSanto with Triple Crown Corporation, and I wanted to clarify, this isn't a modification of the Park Place plan. What we're intending to do is file a new plan, but we wanted to review with the township what was on the Park Place plan and what will be different so we could get any input prior to us submitting our revised design. So this is Lancer Street that comes into this property. And the Park Place plan included this property and the whole way up onto this property. And it was a total of 37 townhomes, which was shown on that. And the concept was to bring Lancer Street through here, cross this stream, bring a road up and cul-de-sac, and then have 37 townhomes around that. And then continue Lancer Street through the property to this point. On Royal Avenue, which is developed on the other side, the previous developer left a right-of-way here, and the agreement with the township was the township would then connect this build from Royal Avenue, this piece of roadway, and tie into Lancer Street. Could we put up the other plan now? Please. So this is Lancer Street on our concept plan, where we would come in and just cul-de-sac it around here, and we are going to be proposing 21 townhomes, not crossing the street, not extending it up this way, but this will prohibit Lancer Street from continuing straight through the property and making that tie-in to Royal Avenue. So the positive with this is we believe these slopes going up this way are too steep to readily develop. The cost to cross the stream is economically not feasible to add the additional units. So the previous plan had 37. This is going to be 21, so it's a reduction in density of 16 units. But to build in this area, the 21 units, you just can't make this extension. And then, could we flip back to the other one, please? Thank you. There's no funding, when I spoke to Mr. Wolf, established by the township to do that. And under the previous plan, it was the township's obligation to put in this segment of roadway. And in addition to that, it's wetlands. So there would have to be some sort of permit requirement, mitigation, off-site mitigation of wetlands, something the township would have to do. So I don't know that anybody on the board remembers this old plan for Lancer Street, and it was never recorded. It was approved but never recorded. And I don't know that the township ever really had any intentions of extending that segment of roadway. But our intention is to submit an entirely new plan. It'll be 21 units, and it will not make that connection. So we wanted to bring that to the board's attention, get any input prior to us submitting our plans to, preliminary final plans to the Planning Commission, and/or address any concerns that the board may have.
So Mark, by not connecting that, the township wouldn't have to pay anything.
That's correct, and I didn't get a big enough set of the plans, but Royal Avenue comes up here, and when this is dedicated to the township, it's going to come out straight across here and tie into, what is that, Earl Road over there.
Earl Avenue.
But Royal up at that point is kind of narrow. It's the cartway, I don't know how wide it is, but I'm going to say it's only like 24 feet wide. It's a very narrow segment of cartway, but you will have connectivity up through here and across to Earl Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, on this map, from what I'm understanding, and please help me, where it enters in Lancer, that's going to be an L shape, or I mean, it will turn, move the marker over, and that's, okay, the development will stay within it, it will not cross the streams, is that correct? Or will still?
No,
It will?
It will not cross the
Will
street.
not?
Yes.
Okay, so when it comes in and curves, I'm going to use, if the map were northeast, south, and west, but as it's displayed, when it comes in and then goes south, or does it like swing up and then go down? From right there, just draw it with the red.
I'll just throw the other concept plan up and you can.
Okay.
So this is Lancer. It's going to come in like this, make a little loop, and back out. The stream is over here.
Oh, okay. So with
Concept on the previous plan was to extend Lancer straight through here to Royal.
Okay, in so doing, and you're not that far along yet, but with this configuration that you're proposing, how does it have impact on emergency vehicles, i.e., fire trucks, school buses, et cetera? Or have you already taken that into consideration?
Yes, obviously, we're going to do all the turning radiuses for the planning process.
And that would be my biggest concern for emergency vehicles, school buses, et cetera.
Yeah, I would think that this plan would be better than the old one. First of all, if I were a resident of the townhomes that are on the other side, I would be concerned that by connecting these two roads, you would start throwing a lot of traffic past people's townhomes that they've bought in an area where clearly there's not a lot of through traffic. And also you would throw some of that traffic onto Lancer, which is not really built to handle it. So I'm not really sure that connection was a good idea to begin with. In other words, I like this plan better.
Well, we like it better too. That's all.
And you're not impacting a wetland.
Right.
Yes, we're going to avoid the stream crossing. It'll be 17 units less. It'll be less impactful, and we think it's viable economically, and it's going to be very similar to the development that we just did up the street on Byron Avenue, known as Wind Chase, which we finished up. So with that,
And I mean, I agree with Loman, and I'm sure you're going to get
Repeat
in.
that, please. Yeah.
That's two tonight.
It's 2 tonight.
Also, I'm sure you're going to get into discussion about parking and impervious coverages and all that good stuff, but I'm assuming you've taken all those things into consideration after you leave here, or before it comes back this far. I don't want to get back this far and go through the same scenarios.
No, we've looked at, we're showing a detention basin here. We'll be able to control the stormwater. We've calculated the impervious coverage. We've kind of gotten this to a point before we go and do all the detailed planning. We wanted to review with the board the concept of not extending Lancer Street through, knowing that Royal Avenue was going to extend up through the top anyways.
Unfortunately, the other residents left. Since you said retention plan, I'm sure it's going to be an HOA's responsibility to maintain the retention plan at some point.
Yes, and just to
That only surfaced as a result of this earlier discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I did just want to digress to that to give one bit of information that I think Ms. Lindsay was asking about, the notification. With all of the new NPDS permits that are filed, you have to record a document notifying the homeowners that what is their responsibilities, and you have to file the PCSM plan, which is the post-construction stormwater management plan. Now, that's notice. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know what they're reading. It's technical,
Or they
but
don't
it is officially filed now,
Right.
and that notification is out there. And then in some homeowners associations, they actually take on all of that responsibility of the maintenance, whereas in the much older communities, it just, that was the course of business at the time, so.
So Mark, they're going to back up against the townhomes there at Wilshire Estates?
Well, they will theoretically, but there's about
There's a buffer.
140-foot separation where
Yeah.
that road would have been extended, so
Okay.
there's a very heavy buffer between them.
Who has control of that buffer, Mark?
I think that's Wilshire Estates ground.
It is,
Yeah,
okay. I wasn't sure whether that's part of yours or whether that's on the other side.
No, it's part
The
of
buffer's on there,
Wilshire's.
okay.
They actually put the radiuses in and dedicated, and at least have shown that on their plan as right of way if the township wanted.
Okay, good.
And will you be selling these, Mark?
We're looking to keep these as we did with Wind Chase.
Okay, okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
I asked if he was going to be selling them, and he said he's going to keep them the way he has at Wind Chased.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay, I think you have your, much easier than the last plan you came around here with.
Well, we'll see in a month, hopefully 2 or 3 months with this as we get it processed, and we'll see you next week on the other plan.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Any member of the public want to comment on this? No. Hold on one second, Mark. We might have a question.
That's what I just.
John Church, 600 Front Street. The new development stormwater permit that he was talking about, is that money going to be included in the stormwater fee? Or is there a payment for that, or is that just a permit that he gets to do work?
I'm not sure I
You're
understand.
talking about the NPDES permit. That's a permit that the developer has to get from Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection through the Dauphin County Conservation Service. Lower Paxton Township has no involvement in it.
So then when a developer does work in the township and it affects the stormwater drainage, and for example, up at Wind Chase, we have to extend our stormwater pipe from the block down up to Wind Chase. Is everybody, you understand what I'm saying, Mr. Wolf? Up at Wind Chase,
Correct,
when Mr. Horning was on the board, I
correct.
brought up the question because once they started developing Wind Chase, the water was running from Wind Chase into the neighboring properties.
Correct.
And Mr. Horning told me that the township has to pay to extend the stormwater pipe from where it is to their property.
In that situation, yes.
Okay, so in this new development situation, is the township going to have to pay to connect the sewer to his property, or is he going to pay to connect the?
He will pay to
or
connect.
sewer?
He will pay to connect to the stormwater
Yeah,
facilities.
that's all I'm checking. I want to make sure that they're.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to item 10. We have a number of local share grant applications to Dauphin County, and I guess we have to rank these in importance, Mr. Wolf.
Yes, board members, this is an annual process. The process has been set forth by essentially the Dauphin County Commissioners. And there is the local share, municipal local share grant program, commonly referred to as gaming grants. The municipal local share program is funded by revenues that Dauphin County receives from actually Hollywood Casino. The grant program provides that municipalities and nonprofit organizations can apply for funding to Dauphin County, and any application that is submitted from any entity in Lower Paxton Township must first have the concurrence of this Board of Supervisors prior to being submitted. Applications are due to be submitted on or before September 1st. This board will have a brief presentation on the applications as listed on your agenda this evening from the applicants, and then at your August 21st business meeting, the board will act on potentially all, although you don't have to. You'll act on resolutions authorizing a concurrence of this Board of Supervisors with the submission of the grant application. Board members, as you can see that there are actually 3 grant applications affecting municipal property. They're the last 3 on your list. And the others are being submitted by private nonprofit entities in Lower Paxton Township requesting your concurrence and authorization to submit from within Lower Paxton Township. The process sounds relatively technical. It's not. And I think what you need to hear from each of the entities is a brief description of what they do and how much money they are going to request in the grant application process. If there's any questions on the process itself, I'll be happy to address them. If not, you can listen to whoever you want for however long you want.
Well, we generally like to keep presentations to 5 minutes or less, preferably less. We haven't done well on that this evening. But does anybody wish to address the board on this particular issue? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium with your name and address. Your name and address, yes.
Jack Doherty, 2407 Abbey Lane. For the board members that I have not met, I am the chair of the Friendship Center Operating Board, and I am here tonight on behalf of that board to ask for your support for our project for the refurbishment and repair of our slide. The slide, as I'm sure you're aware, is a prominent feature in our advertising, in our programming. It's prominently used in kids' classes and in rentals. It's a fixture that's a symbol of the center. In the years since the years that the Friendship Center has been built, it's never gone through a major repair. The staff during their maintenance week has done their best to try to address some of the cosmetic issues that have developed over the years. Recently, within the last few months, we reviewed the steps. The steps are concrete steps set in steel. Based on the harsh chlorinated environment, it's just deteriorated over the years. We've had a sheet metal expert come in, take a look at take a look at it, and it's just deteriorated to the point they can't grind it down and epoxy it anymore. They're just going to have to be replaced. In the course of reviewing the steps, we've also looked at the horizontal supports that hold the fiberglass for the slide, and that is also showing deterioration. So we've, over the last few months, we've looked at some local contractors. There's a sheet metal contractor and a painter that we've received preliminary estimates from, and those estimates are coming in at approximately about $106,000. Again, that's a preliminary estimate. We have received a gracious donation from Sandy Prawl and from her sister in the amount of $23,000 to go towards that project. We've also solicited a donation from M&T Bank. They've made a small contribution, which we are going to apply towards that as well. In order to give us a little bit of flexibility, we're asking for $125,000. We're hoping that we don't need all of that with the contributions that we have, but that would at least give us a little bit of a cushion. So if there's any questions that you have, I'd be willing to address those.
Any questions?
Yeah, and we did do this on Road Tour, so we know,
Yeah.
you know how bad it is.
We
so,
do know.
yeah.
Yes, Mr. Wolf on Road Tour took us to the top of said slide and then pointed out all the deficiencies in the poles holding it up.
Yeah, after we got
which
to
I
the
thought
top.
was an interesting sequence of timing. It would have been nice to have known that before we all climbed to the top of it.
I was with you.
Yeah, you were with us.
Were you,
that is
were you
true.
down below, or did you go up?
Fortunately, it held up. We did not all end up in the pool. So, but yes, we were over to look at it, and we did see the problems of which you spoke. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, we appreciate the comments.
Would anybody else like to address the board on this subject? Yes, sir.
My name is George Kunkel, and I live at 6530 Parkway East, and I'm president of the board of Coons Memorial Park Swim Club. And several years ago, we had to remove our slide because of the same problems, only we didn't have any money to replace it. Our grant is for painting the inside and outside of our two buildings, our snack bar and our bathhouse. They haven't been painted for 25, 30 years. And the exterior of the building, some places, is starting to deteriorate. And I know we'll have to do some repairs to that. And we have some mold and mildew on the inside on the ceilings. Thing that concerns me is the township has done a great job of taking care of Coons Park. They replaced the pavilion, put in a new playground, and Coons Park is a gem in the township and in Linglestown. The problem is the buildings at Coons Pool are an eyesore, detracting from the park. And I think that's one of the major reasons why, another major reason why it needs to be remediated. So, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Would anybody else like to speak on the subject?
Is that it?
Any board members have comments or questions? Then if you could fill out your ranking. By the way, the one you want most should be given the 10, and the one you want least, the 1. Don't get it backward. So
Exactly.
yeah, so if you would fill out your grid and pass them down to Mr. Wolf, and we'll let him then tabulate those. That then moves us, I believe, to item 11. Well, we pretty much had that discussion. Item 12, ought to know, no items, nothing we ought to know this time around, Mr. Wolf.
Nothing for this evening, board members.
And improvement guarantees, I see none. Would that be accurate?
There are none this evening.
With that, it would appear that we have run out of business to conduct. Are there any additional comments?
Thank God.
Thank God. Well, Supervisor Zumas, we decided to baptize you by fire with one of our longer meetings, and I think you got a good sense of a number of the issues we face, and we look forward to working with you over the coming years to address these issues. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Zumas would like his first motion to be to
then
adjourn.
I will certainly yield. I'll be more than happy to be
Mr.
supportive
Zumas
with a
has the motion that
second.
we adjourn. I assume Mr. Chrisman will second.
I will be supportive,
All
yes.
in favor, aye?
Aye.
Everyone have a nice evening.
All right. How about that?
You notice we